On the shark bite, which numbers do we want to see? Do go over, have questions about. So we'll do 2. This is an evaluating problem. You're given g of -4. That -4 is going to go where x is. So everywhere you see an x, you're going to put -4 in for it. So this would give us +16, +8, plus 5, 24, 25, so 29. So g of -4 equals 29. Question on that. Any others on the shark bite? You may not have been thinking about this, but every time we do a shark bite, it's like a little mini review that will help you, especially if you have to take the final. So it'll be things throughout the year that we either covered or algebra lessons that we've reviewed. Great. So today's review lesson is on parallel perpendicular lines. Before we get into that, I want to remind you what's significant about those two things. Write this somewhere on your paper. Parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. Give me an example of a negative reciprocal. So give me a number and then give me its negative reciprocal. If I said like 2, what is the negative reciprocal of that? So it is negative, but then you have to flip it. So it wouldn't be -2, but negative 1/2. So negative reciprocals, you take the number, you flip it. If it was positive, you make it negative. If it was negative, you make it positive. Alright, so in the first section, find the slope of a line that's parallel to each of the given lines. Which of those do we want to see? Do go over review. 1, 3, 6. So number 1, if the slope is parallel, it has to be the same. So what would the slope of a parallel line be for number 1? That's not your slope, that's your y-intercept. Say that again. -9/2. So you have to be able to recognize the different types of slopes. Questions on that one? Besides it. Besides that part. Yeah, that's it. Number 3, what would the slope be that's parallel to this? -1. 5 and 6, we have to remember our Hoy bucks. I'm going to write the opposite side. horizontal lines have 0 slope and are y equals. Vertical lines have undefined slope and are x equals. So be careful, because these only apply to x equals some number, y equals some number. What would the parallel slope of number 5 be? So this one is not just, it's not an x equals, but it's not a y equals either. It's a y equals x. So there's a number in front. What is that slope? -1. But for 6, what would the slope that's parallel to that one be? 4 is not the slope. It's a y equals. What is that slope? 0. So that's where it gets tricky, and we have to remember the difference. Do you have questions about those before we continue? Go on to the next page. In these first 4, which of those do you want to see, do go over review? So this is now perpendicular, where we have to take it, flip it. If it was positive, make it negative, or vice versa. What would the perpendicular slope of 9 be? But negative. What about 10? Positive 3/5. Eight, what would the negative reciprocal, or what would the perpendicular slope for this one be? Positive 1. We're going to come back to the bottom section. I gave you 2 sets of notes because one has things that the other didn't. So go to the other one and find this section. Now we are writing an equation that's parallel to the line given. Which of those in the first section do we want to see, do go over review? 3. So starting with 2, you have to know what the slope is that's parallel to this line. So what would that be first? -3. So that part is the same. Now we have to write the equation with that slope with a different y-intercept. So y equals -3x. Someone give me a y-intercept that's not 0. 2 works. It just can't be the same. So any other y-intercept except 0 works. Three, what would the slope that's parallel to this be? 4/3. So then we're going to use this slope and a different y-intercept to write the equation. So y equals 4/3x. Give me a y-intercept. Sure. +4. Questions on those two so far? 8, what would the slope that's parallel to this be? -1/4. And then let's use that to write an equation. Y equals -1/4 x. Give me a y-intercept. Any others in that section? The y-intercept here? Yeah. Yes. You just don't write that at all for this section. For the next section, it's different. Okay. Next section, now we're dealing with perpendiculars, and this goes on to the next page. Which of these do we want to see do go over review? And 12. 10 and 12 is what you said. So we'll start with those. So first, what is the slope that's perpendicular to this? So negative reciprocals. Positive 2/7. Then we need to use that slope, and we can pick whatever y-intercept we want. It could be the same, it could be different, it doesn't matter. So y equals 2/7x. What do we want our y-intercept to be? +3, +6, +0. It doesn't matter for this one.
So parallel, that has to be different, and then perpendicular would be different.
So parallel, it could have been like the negative version of that, and that would still be different. But perpendicular could be whatever you want. You could start making up random things like +1,000,000. That would still work. Right? 12. What is the perpendicular slope? Not in this case. So look at the number before x, flip it to this one. And then our equation, y equals 1x, or just x. What do we want our y-intercept to be? +2. Questions on either of those? Go on to the next page. These 4 are in the same section. Are there any of those that we want to see you go over review? Bless you. Then I believe the next ones go into the graphs. So starting with the graphs, are there any we want to see do go over review? And there are 2 more on the back. So starting with 36, the direction said write an equation for the line that's parallel and perpendicular. So find the original first. Look at what your y-intercept is. Find another point on this that would cross the grid lines exactly. This one. To help you find your slope. So the original equation is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, -7/2 x +3. Questions on how we found the original first?
This velocity you have.
This way? Wherever it crosses the y-axis. Then we have to come up with something that would be parallel and something that would be perpendicular. parallel is going to have the same slope. What would we put for an equation that's parallel? Any y-intercept that's not 3. So then B, take the slope, flip it, make it positive, and then put whatever y-intercept you want. Questions on that one or any other questions in this section? Those were all the easier examples. That's why I wanted to do those first. Go back to the first set of notes. And then look through this section. It goes onto the back page. Are there any of those we want to see you go over review? 11. Okay. Look at all of them because some are parallel, some are perpendicular, some have different equations. 15. We have 11, we have 15. Dylan? 11, 15, 17. Any others in that section? Right. We'll start with those. If you come across any others, we'll back. Before we do anything, you may or may not remember this, but we need our point slope formula. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So in order to do this, we need to know what our slope is. We're given a point, and we have to put all that in this formula. So if it's parallel, the slope is going to be the same. So what's given is your slope. That's your m. The point is your x1, y1. The y-intercept in this equation, we completely ignore. We don't do anything with that. Cross it out if you need to. The y and the x in your equation stay the variables y and x. And then we can start putting things in. So y minus y1 is 2 equals our m is 5. And notice that the m is just a number, not the x, so if you want to cross that out, you can as well. Parentheses, x minus our x1 is negative. So for now, I'm going to put minus a negative, but as you get used to it, you can just change that to a plus. Then we can start to simplify. Simplify this first before you distribute. Distribute the 5. Then our end goal is to get y by itself. So what would our last step be? So y equals 5x plus 7 is a parallel line that's, is a line that's parallel to the original that goes through this point. If we were to graph it, we would be able to see that. What questions do we have on that before we continue? Let's try the next one. Same thing. Go through, label everything. This is parallel, so it has to be the same. You can get rid of the x minus 5. You don't need that. This is going to be x1 and y1. So now you have the things you need to put everything together. So y minus 0 equals negative 3 over 5, x minus a negative 5. We can start to simplify both sides at the same time. Y minus 0 is just going to be y. But we have to change this to a plus before we can distribute. And then distribute. The first term is just going to be this times x. Multiply negative 3/5 and 5 until we get. So this would be the line that is parallel to the original.
Tristan, can you hit new session? Thank you.
What questions do we have on that one? On to the next. Starting with 15, we have another parallel. So the slope is going to be the same. We have x1, we have y1. If you want to rewrite the equation on this page somewhere so that you don't have to click back and forth. And use that formula with all of these numbers. Y minus, now we have two negatives again. So minus a negative equals 3 over 2. Then in parentheses, x minus a negative 4. Both of these would have to become a plus before you could do anything else. But then you could distribute. So this would become 3 over 2x. What would 3 over 2 times 4 give us? And then get rid of the 3 by subtracting. You have the equation that is parallel to the original. Questions on that one? So all the examples we've done so far have been parallel, this one's perpendicular. So we have to change our slope first. What would be the perpendicular slope? So once you change it, you don't need that original anymore. So you have your m, you have your x1, you have your y1. So y minus 1 equals 4 over 9, x minus 5. Then you can distribute. In your calculator, multiply 4/9 and negative 5. see if you're going to end up with a fraction or decimal. If that's the fraction you got, that was correct. If you got a decimal, make sure you're doing it as a fraction because you would have repeating decimals. But then when we go to add 1, we're going to end up with a fraction, which is fine. That happens sometimes. So negative 11 ninths. So then this would be the equation that's perpendicular to the original. Are there any others in this section we want to go over review? If none, then you have the rest of class to be practicing this, going back and doing Khan Academy, Unit 8, or any of the ones on the board. Find the dates. I'll put the ones from today up there as well. If you need to work on retake work or finish your test, now would be a great time to do that. You only have until the 22nd to finish this test if you haven't. And then make sure you retake as soon as possible.